tonight we're going to skip the treasurer's report and the president's report because the treasurer and president aren't here. It's going to be a Q&A, but before we get into the Q&A, there are a couple things that I wanted to show people. And for that, as kind of our intro, I'm going to show my screen. And if I'm lucky and believe in Tinkerbells, you should be able to see a bunch of book covers. Is that what you're seeing? Okay. These books, these are all books, electronic books that you can get from Take Control Books. And I like Take Control Books because they update them quickly. They're usually not terribly expensive, like $14.95. If you're a member of the user group, you also get a discount of 15–20%. I don't remember what it is. And they're also, you can just, if you're interested in the book, you can just buy it and download it and start reading it right then. They come in iBooks format, or you can also get them in Kindle format if you have a Kindle, but I like the iBooks ones. So we were talking about iOS 16, and they have an iOS 16 book out already, and it's got nice table of contents, and it talks all kinds of things about iOS 16. They've also got a book on Ventura. Where's Ventura? And Ventura hasn't even been released yet, but they already have a book on that. And several other things that people have talked about, like securing your Mac, digital storage, how Find My and AirTags works, backing up your Mac. A couple of people wanted to know about doing scripts and automation. We were talking about Siri last time. There's a book on Siri. One of the things that I'm intensely interested in is privacy and security, particularly on iPhones and iPads, because you carry them around. They have all these plus about 100 other titles. And I highly encourage you to just go into Google and type Take Control Books and go to the website and take a look, because it's a quick way of getting up-to-date documentation without a lot of strain on your part. I also mentioned when we were talking about messages and use with other computers and other types of phones, Google has created a website that is basically asking Apple to change how Apple Messages works so that you don't have the red and green boxes when you're having a conversation with somebody who has an Android. And Google's very upset about this because people have they have abandoned Android just because they like the way messages is done on the Mac. And I found it ironic that Google actually went out and created a website about that. And the final thing I wanted to show you is, I don't know how many of you have an Apple TV, but 9to5Mac, which is a website, has a guide now to every single Apple TV show. So it goes to, it shows trailers from the movies. It goes through all the different TV shows they have, all the movies they have. One of the Apple movies, CODA, which Kathleen and I really liked. CODA stands for Children of Child of Deaf Adults, CODA. And it's about a hearing child who has two deaf parents, and the deaf parents don't understand why the child wants to embark upon a singing career. Really, really, really nicely done movie. And it's available on Apple's Apple TV Plus. But this guide has every single show and every single movie that they've released. And I'm going to paste the URL into the chat window so that you can see it. as soon as I find the chat window. Since I'm sharing my screen, my chat window went away. So got to paste it into the chat window. It's really quite astonishing how far Apple has come with Apple TV in a short period of time. One of the nice things about Apple TV is that you can watch Apple TV on your phone, you can watch it on your iPad, you can watch it on your TV, so it's you can watch it on your Mac. So it's really quite astonishing. Kathleen, when we went back to Maryland in June for her ordination, they had a new episode of something we were watching, and we couldn't get it on the TV in the hotel, so we watched it on our iPad, and it was quite pleasant. The air conditioner in our hotel room was terrible, but aside from the noise of the air conditioner, it was quite pleasant just to watch on our iPad. And those are kind of my show and tell before we get on to questions and answers. Anyone have a question? No questions.
I have a friend that says if you hold your phone up to those scanning little squares on TV, that's going to steal information off your phone. Can I tell her that that's not true?
You can definitely tell her that that's not true. There is a slight truth to this. I've never actually watched Home Shopping Channel. The idea of watching TV to have someone sell me things just strikes me as absurd. But on Home Shopping Channel, they do have put up QR codes. And if you, it used to be that you had to have a QR app for your phone, but you don't have to do that anymore. If you bring up the camera app on the phone and you just hold it over a QR code, the camera app, if you're using a recent version of iOS, the camera app will notice the QR code and it'll show the URL that you're supposed to go to in the camera. Now, here's where it's, here's how some people have taken advantage of that. With the Home Shopping Channel, the QR codes, if you scan them off the TV with your phone, the QR code will try and get your private information. Now, off a phone, they can't get a heck of a lot, but they'll be able to tell that you used an iPhone, and they'll try and get your latitude and longitude. Apple blocks that, but they definitely do try that. And on Android phones, they are successful. So if you have an Android phone, you hold it up to a QR code on Home Shopping Channel, it will get your the model of phone you have, your latitude and longitude, and depending upon how you have it set up, it'll also get your email address. But on an iPhone, no, that's blocked. At least on, if you have an updated iPhone. If you have something older, I don't know. I had a friend who had an iPhone 2 or something, and he was really torqued off that it stopped working in the spring. And the reason why it stopped working is that the 3G network that supports older phones, it was turned off. And people had 12 years notice that the federal government was going to turn it off, but he was still offended that his phone stopped working. But if his phone was working, I can't swear that the Apple could protect it. But if you have a modern phone, a modern iPhone, no, the iPhone will block that. Other questions? Well, I have a question for you. How many of you have an iPhone? Most of you? The reason why I ask is that if you have an iPhone, you really want to, among other things, you want to update to the latest version of the iOS operating system. They recently had a security update that if you're running iOS, the latest version of iOS, which is what, 16, you get the security update. But if you have a phone that cannot be updated to the current operating system, it doesn't get the security update. And what the security update does is prevent people from stealing information from you via web links. So it's definitely worth getting. They're not going to get anything particularly valuable, but what they can do is they can get enough information that they'll launch a denial of service attack against your phone. And what that means is your phone is so busy responding to nonsense that you can't get it to do anything else until you turn it off and turn it back on again. And when I mean turn it off, I mean completely power it down and then bring it back up again. So you do want to get that update. I was expecting by this time that the new Mac operating system, Ventura, would be out, and it's not, and I don't even know when it will be, but they are releasing final betas right now, so it should be reasonably close. When it does, I will probably do a presentation on Ventura. There are some features that are kind of hard to explain unless somebody actually demonstrates them to you. Ventura will offer much closer links between your Mac and your iPad, for example, or your Mac and your phone. And it's kind of hard to explain how that works without actually demonstrating it. Any questions? No questions.
Well, I think Michael and I both have the same laptop that has the last Intel chip. I know I've asked you this before, so we don't know if it'll accept Ventura.
Apple on their website has a list of what is supported.
Oh,
and if you just type in macOS Ventura into Google, the very top link is usually the Apple site. And if you scroll down to the bottom, it'll have a list of what is supported. But in terms of the difference between what is the current one? Monterey? Shows you how often I pay attention to this. The big difference between Monterey and Ventura is mostly in collaboration features, allowing you to do things on multiple devices at once and then combining them. That's a big thing. It also has some security features, particularly for people who have the newer chips in them. So if they have the Apple Silicon chips, they figured out ways to make them even tighter security. And then a lot of the stuff that they're doing is it's evolutionary rather than revolutionary. But Apple's really getting into the collaboration feature. There are things that you just naturally are easier to do on your phone than on your Mac, and there are things that are easier to do on your Mac instead of a phone. And they're trying to be able to take the advantages of one and take advantage of it on another. I don't know how many of you have ever done it, but it's been possible for some time now to start a phone call on your Mac and then continue it on your phone. You can actually answer your iPhone on your Mac. I've done it a number of times. But then somebody asks for something, you have to go wander into another phone room. You can just continue it on your phone. But it's the sort of thing you have to kind of practice with, or otherwise you might just interrupt. Kathleen will she'll be on a phone call and she'll get another phone call. She'll put somebody on hold and continue on her phone, on her iPhone. I've never been able to do this without hanging up on someone. So, it's something that it takes practice. And since, as Kathleen will point out, I hardly ever talk to anybody on the phone, I just don't have much practice. So, but that should be coming sometime in the near future. Questions?
I have a couple of questions. This is Charlie.
Uh-huh.
One is so I've tried to stop using Google Chrome and use Safari, but and I've used Safari in the past, but when I did the last update on my computer, which is a MacBook Pro. Now when I use Safari, I go to sign in to any account I have, a bank, any, it asks for, it asks for the computer account password for the user, Charlie Watts. Nothing is in the, I don't know what the user, Charlie Watts. It's not my Apple ID. It's not, most everything is under my, one of my email address.
I don't know, is the website asking for that, or is something else asking for that? Oh, I know what it's doing.
Safari's asking for it.
Okay, Safari's asking for it because you're going to a site that you haven't recently visited and it's asking for a password. And your Safari won't give them your password until it confirms who you are. So the user, meaning you, it wants the password you use to log into your computer, not your password for your email or the password for the website. It wants the password for your computer because you are authorizing your computer to give your password to the website. So it wants to make sure that you're not just some person who sat down at the computer and is stealing your identity.
Right. So I put in the password that I use to get into my computer, and it does its shake, shake, shake. So I've not been able to go to anything on, and then it locks me out of that on, X many tries, then it says. So if it's even Facebook, if it's anything, then I'm kicked off.
But then you're not giving it you're not giving it password you think you're giving it. I'll give you some examples. If your caps lock key's on, that'll screw up your password. I also had somebody at work, they had a very cluttered desk and their notepad would be resting on the key. So when they typed, think they were typing what they were typing in something else and they didn't like it. But if it's asking for your user name password for your computer and it's not accepting it, then your Mac is saying, no, you're not giving it the right password. So you and your Mac need to go into therapy and talk to a counselor or something.
I agree.
I know sometimes it can get confusing, but what the Mac is trying to do, it's saying it's not going to give up your credential unless you can prove who you are.
So it's the sign in, like when you open it up, you put your, it's 4 digits and you just enter that and then it opens it up. Is that?
Yeah, that should be what it's asking for.
All right. So I don't know what that is. Okay. My other question is, I have an Apple Watch that was back maybe 5 years ago when they were very expensive. And it was when I had my traumatic brain injury. And so the doctor wanted me to have something, so if I fell, because I live alone, that that I could. So I got an Apple Watch and I could answer my phone, a secret code kind of thing. And I did not care for doing that. I didn't want to use it as my phone. And so I sort of just put it in a drawer. And then I would like to have a watch, but I can't. So I tried to pair it and went, and is there a time limit on how long? You can't just use it then. It's a $900 nothing now. You can't, it's not.
It depends upon it would depend upon how old it is, but as far as I know, you'd have to go back quite a ways before they're really obsolete. I think they've stopped support for things like the Apple Watch Series 3, which was quite some time ago. But just as an example of what you're doing, when you're talking about asking for websites, asking for passwords, I don't even type those in anymore. My watch, I can set it up so that if I'm wearing my watch and I'm near my computer says, "Oh, it's you," and lets me in.
Yeah.
I don't even have to type in my password. So I have to do it when if the machine's been turned off and I boot it, I have to type in the password. But once it's up and running, no, I just use my watch. But it have to be fairly old before it wouldn't allow, before it wouldn't pair it. Pardon?
It goes to parrot and then it just, it keeps, says it's looking for it and then it all goes to sleep and it never does. So I tried just put it, because it was back, it had all the information in Colorado. So I went ahead and it said, "Do you want to put it back to factory setting?" And I said, yes. Reading through what you could do. And then it said you could do that and then put it and pair it with my phone now. So I
Okay.
have Apple Watch, I have the watch on my phone and I can put the watch, but it just,
Okay. Depending upon the pairing process can take a while. First of all, you have to have decent Wi-Fi because it's doing the pairing via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth both at the same time. And it also, they should be fully charged. And in our case, we have the best success if the watch is actually on its charger. Actually, maybe the watch doesn't have to be on the charger, but the phone definitely should be on its charger, because if the phone falls asleep, then it falls asleep and it doesn't pair. And it can take a while if you don't have a good strong signal. So make sure they're both charged and make sure the phone in particular is on its charger. And I will do it while I'm eating lunch or something like that, so that if one of them starts to fall asleep, I'll stop it. Because the older watches, they take longer to pair than the newer ones. The chips in them, for one thing, are not as fast as the current model. So yes, it could take a while.
so it's almost better to buy because now the watches have come down in price.
Well, there's also, you mentioned your traumatic brain injury, and this is something Kathleen's going to discuss when she gets the healthcare ones, but the modern watches, the new ones, have a fall feature. So if you were to fall, you don't even have to make a call. Your watch will do it for you. It'll call 911. And I don't know if you know how 911 responds, but if you cannot respond when your watch says, "Hi, this is 911, how can we help you?" If you do not respond, they'll send a truck.
Yes, and that's why I got it, because it would do that. So, yeah, that they actually would, that, yeah, because that gives them the lunge, no matter where you are in the car, anywhere, it gives it the information.
Yes.
Yes, and so, yes, that was originally why I did it. I got it. So, yeah.
But the series that was just released, the Apple Watch Series 8, also, if you're in a crash in your car, it'll automatically call 911. Kathleen insisted, I don't have the new one, I have previous generation, but she got it because I can check blood oxygen level. I've got heart arrhythmia. I can take an EKG with the watch. So what it does is really quite remarkable. But in terms of the pairing process, both the watch and the phone have to be fully charged. And if one of them falls asleep, it just takes forever. So I would do it like when I was eating lunch and we're sitting there talking, I notice it's starting to fall asleep, I'll tap it to tell it to wake up. Because the self signal where we are is really kind of terrible. So
It is.
Just as an FYI, if you happen to be going to Seattle or Tacoma, there's an Apple store at Tacoma Mall, there's an Apple store at Alderwood Mall, And my favorite one in Seattle is the one at University Village, because it's got a tree growing up through it, and I just think it's really special. But if you buy a watch or an iPad or an iPhone or something at the store, they'll set it up for you on the spot. It sometimes might take half an hour, 45 minutes. And so you go have some coffee or something and come back, but they'll do it for you. And I mention that because if you don't have a good Wi-Fi signal in your home, sometimes it can take a lot of trouble. It did take a lot of effort. Kathleen's iPhone 14 Pro that she got 3 weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, was the first one she ever set up by herself. Because in the past we were on Verizon and they say it'll automatically set it up. If you're on Verizon, they lie. This one though has an electronic eSIM. It doesn't have a physical SIM that you stick into it. And she set it up by herself. She was having lunch, and by the time we had lunch, it was done. So Apple's learning to avoid some of the obstacles thrown up by their partners. And I'm not going to say AT&T or Verizon, but possibly AT&T and Verizon. Other questions? No more questions?
One small question. Out of the T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, which provider for internet would you recommend? I mean, for your phone, for the cellular part.
Kathleen and I didn't have a cell phone until after. I realize this is a roundabout story, but there's a point to it. Kathleen and I didn't have cell phones until after 9/11. On 9/11, I was at work and Kathleen was an officer in the Navy, and I thought she was taking the day off, but I was a little bit surprised at around 3 in the afternoon to find out that she'd gone into Walter Reed Medical Center early in the morning, and she'd been trapped there all day, because that's where they were taking the casualties from the Pentagon, the attack on the Pentagon. So they sent everybody at Noah home at 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock, somewhere between 10 and 11 o'clock. They sent everyone home. I couldn't get home because I carpooled in with Kathleen. I worked in Silver Spring, Maryland. She worked in Northern Virginia at the Pentagon. And I carpooled in with her, and then she was going to run an appointment. Then she was going to go back to Baltimore. Well, she never got back to Baltimore. So I thought she would be home and she'd take care of our child when she came home from school. And we couldn't contact anybody because the phone lines were jammed. And we didn't get home to what was she in? 9th grade, something? We didn't get home to see her until after midnight. So we got cell phones for all 3 of us, and we got them from AT&T because they had a discount for people in the military and so on and so forth. We came to Squim, and we could not get a cell signal in our house at all. And we complained to AT&T, and AT&T said, have you tried standing on the roof? Have you tried using it while wearing a tutu? All kinds of suggestions, none of which worked. So our neighbors had phones from Verizon. So we switched carriers, went with Verizon, and we have a good experience with Verizon. I have a friend who's in Colorado, and she's been on Verizon for quite some time, and she's really torqued off with them. And T-Mobile has a good cell system in the Denver area. And she thought about going to T-Mobile until one of the guys turned out to be one of the salespeople turned it out to be more interested in groping women than in selling things, and she ended up going back with Verizon. But I can't really give an overall recommendation. I used to tell people don't go with T-Mobile, period, because they were terrible. There were people in the DC area who, as they went around the Beltway that goes around DC, they would spend about 75% of the time in a blackout. And that was kind of hard. But when T-Mobile merged with whoever it was they merged with, I don't even remember anymore, they had their coverage didn't really overlap that much. So it actually greatly expanded what both of them could do. And so now T-Mobile's a decent choice for Denver, for Washington, DC, for lots of places. Still not for the Olympic Peninsula. So I would go basically with what you and your neighbors can do, because Verizon has the largest system in the country, but the gap is less than it used to be. The big difference you'll notice is not the coverage in Philadelphia or Houston or so on and so forth. The big difference for you should be, does it work in my own house? Because it's really annoying to have a cell phone that doesn't work in your own home. So talk to your neighbors, see what works for them. If you're happy with what you have right now, then keep it. I don't really recommend any particular vendor right now. I know that T-Mobile says that they're trying to push into the peninsula to have much better service, but I haven't really seen much evidence. Chris, did you have a comment? You're muted.
Sorry. I've been paying attention because Verizon has been lobbying me now for 2 years because they are cutting off service to my vintage phone, which is a Verizon etched LG flip phone that I've been very happy with for the last 11 to 12 years. It fits in my palm, it fits in my pocket. It does what I want it to do. But I've been shopping, and I actually have a question because I really want to get an iPhone. But I think I'm going to have to get a mini to make it small enough for me to hang on to. But I've been noticing on the Nextdoor platform, people complaining about their 5G T-Mobile service, but any of the 5G services. But so far, Verizon does not have 5G service for our whole area here. T-Mobile for walking around, maybe in your house you got 5G, but
Well, there's something.
but the charts for Verizon do not show 5G for regular cell service.
I want to kind of caution people about getting too focused on the 5G. 5G, in spite of what the TV commercials say, is not a technical term. It is a marketing term. So what Verizon calls 5G and what T-Mobile calls 5G and what AT&T call 5G are not the same thing. So you can't use them to compare one with the other. And I will tell you that the first time I ever got a 5G signal was when I went back for Kathleen's ordination, because anywhere we went in the DC metro area, I got 5G on my Verizon phone. And when we came back, she had an appointment in Seattle, and I also got 5G in Seattle. But here on the peninsula, no, I don't have 5G. However, nobody else does either, no matter who they get it from, no matter what their coverage says. You're not getting high-speed wireless on the peninsula from anybody. Their marketing says that they might have 5G, but that just means the equipment supports it. Doesn't mean that they actually are sending the resources to provide you with high-speed internet. I suspect that over the next 2 or 3 years that will change fairly drastically. The telecommunications companies were counting on continuing with landline for quite some time, that people would continue with landline for quite some time. And they weren't doing much to expand their wireless networks, except in large cities. For example, I could get gig Ethernet. I could get gigabit internet connection at home in Columbia, Maryland through Verizon's Fios service. And Fios, again, is not a technical term. It's Verizon's trademark for their high-speed service. And it was cheap and it worked fine, and you can't get it in a city that doesn't already have it. Why? Because Verizon decided that they made more money by not expanding the service. Instead, they just market to more and more people where they already have it installed. And that was their marketing plan. They did the same thing with wireless, that rather than expand wireless service throughout the country, they would just stick with their landline service, and they'd worry about wireless companies or wireless users in high density areas. But then something changed 2 years ago, the pandemic. And a lot of the places where they had planned on expanding actually had a depopulation movement. Large inner core cities, they just depopulated. And to some extent, that's true in Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, San Francisco, a whole bunch of places. So at this point now, it's looking much more economic to actually expand into suburban and rural areas than it was before. Plus, T-Mobile, and I'll mention them by name, even though I don't recommend them for the peninsula. T-Mobile came up with these boxes that you could buy. It basically had a high-speed 5G modem in a box. You put it in your house and you have high-speed wireless throughout your house. No wires or anything. You're just basically paying for this modem in a box that gives you high-speed access to the internet. And T-Mobile rolled it out just kind of as a test thing. It was instantly highly popular, and they still can't meet the demand. So suddenly the telecommunications companies are much more interested in providing decent wireless service to rural areas than they were 2 years ago. And I suspect over the next couple of years, you're going to see improvements. But who's going to put in the most investment? Is it going to be AT&T? Is it going to be Verizon? T-Mobile? I have no idea. I don't think T-Mobile has the capital to be the leader on the peninsula. I suspect it's going to be AT&T or Verizon. And right now, Verizon has a huge head start, but Verizon's been known to make stupid decisions, so I can't predict this the future there. But I do suspect that within the next few years, you will be able to get a 5G signal in places on the peninsula.
A couple of years ago, we got T-Mobile, and it was supposed to come with, I don't know if they called it a hotspot or something. Anyway, it took them months. I think we had T-Mobile for maybe 4 months, and we finally got this little thing that is upstairs by the window. And we now, for the first time in the house and even outside on the garage apron of the garage, we have 4 bars. And it was amazing. We can actually make calls, get calls. And so that's been good for us, because we had such slow internet with Verizon that we changed to Wave. Yeah.
I do think that we're going to see some fairly great changes. Also, what is it called? I can't remember. Congress passed it a few months ago, $375 billion for infrastructure. A big chunk of that is going to be devoted to increasing broadband for rural areas and for inner cities, which means that you and I aren't going to get the money directly, but what they're going to do is they're going to force the broadband companies to actually build their infrastructure out beyond just the large cities. Um, um,
Don't hold your breath.
well, if they want the money, they got to do it. And they're going to want the money.
They've gotten the money for years and have not done it.
Unlike past such things, this one actually has penalty clauses and it's written into the law. So it was passed this year, but they've been working on this for like 5 years. And it should create change. But I will tell you that if you want to know a rural state that's going to get it before anybody else, it's going to be Iowa. And the reason is there are no large cities in Iowa. There are only small cities, but they're very evenly distributed. So all of the telecommunications companies are going to want to get high-speed wireless, high-speed internet into Iowa because it's a huge population in a set space, and they can, and there's already an existing infrastructure. So Iowa's going to do well. The peninsula, not too sure about that.
Lawrence, I have a question and a comment. First, I have T-Mobile, and I've had great service from them. And frankly, if Verizon and AT&T were the only two telephone companies left in the world, I wouldn't have a telephone. I've had horrible experience with both of them. And in addition to having really good service from T-Mobile, when you and I were both on the same coho last week going to Victoria, because I saw you on the deck while I was up in the observation room.
Oh, okay.
You know, T-Mobile for us in the area, if you get along the coast, very often you're picking up Canadian signals, and there's no additional charge for those on T-Mobile. Not trying to sell T-Mobile, it's just that that's a nice benefit of it. And we had free cell phone service the whole week we were in Victoria. My question is, I've used Chrome and Gmail from almost the inception of it. I know you're a Safari and Mail guy. Can you give me a good reason why I should consider going the other way?
I do it for a number of different reasons. One reason why I tend to use on a Mac the same kind of resources that other people use. So I'll use Safari, I'll use Apple Mail, I'll use other things and not try for something more exotic, is that I do a lot of tech support for people. And I used to do this because I worked for a government agency. And even though I wasn't involved in tech support, if you're a techie, people ask you questions. I used to joke that even though I have 2 degrees in history, if electrons ran through it, people would ask me questions about it, which was pretty much true. So I tend to use the same tools that are available to other people rather than to lobby for exotic alternatives. But when it comes to Safari and Apple Mail, the big, huge differences for me are the security. Kathleen and I, we both pay for extra iCloud storage. So we're on the iCloud Plus plan, which means that Safari anonymizes our visits to sites. It doesn't give, when we visit a site, it doesn't give them our correct IP address. It gives them another random IP address, so they can't track us by geolocation. And Mail does the same type of thing. When we visit places, we can actually set up aliases if we sign into Nordstrom and we don't know if we want to see their ads in the future. We can give them an alias, and if the ads get too annoying, we can just delete the aliases and the spam goes away. So the security in Apple Mail and Safari really can't be beat by anybody else. Chrome in particular has some real problems with security. Chrome has an incognito mode, which is supposed to hide your personal information. And after the European Union sued Google, and Google ended up paying $1 billion fine, Google was forced to admit that even in incognito mode, it was getting personal information from people, which is not so great. And Gmail itself is founded upon the ability to sell advertising. So it's quite different than Apple Mail. You can actually have a Gmail account, but use the Apple Mail app to read your Gmail account, and you're safer than you are using Google's own mail account. Having said that, I've got probably 24 different Gmail accounts that I use. The account I have a position in my church, and I use a Gmail account for that position. I don't use my personal email account. I'm an officer in my homeowners association. I use a Gmail account for that. I don't use my personal email account. And that's because, among other things, if you go to the homeowners site, it's got my email address that I use for my office in the homeowners association. And so scammers will come along and they'll scarf up that address, but they'll be scamming my homeowner's address, not my personal address. I haven't exposed my own personal address. So I have lots and lots and lots of Gmail accounts. And I do use Gmail. I just don't use it for when I send Kathleen a message, or my daughter a message, or my brother's messages, or things like that. I use my personal account, which is an Apple Mail account. And I do it basically for the security and privacy issues. Chrome, similarly, I do use Chrome quite often. Chrome has the ability to set up profiles. So if I'm going to a website as an officer of my association, I use my homeowners association profile, and it brings up websites that I use for that purpose, and credentials that I use for that purpose. Or if I'm doing it for my church, I have a profile for my church, and when I log in with that, I'm doing church things. So I can be a completely different person using these profiles in Chrome, and that's useful to me. And Chrome also has some good tools. If you're a website developer, has some tools that there are similar tools in Safari, but they're not as sophisticated as the ones in Chrome. But Chrome has terrible security, and Chrome is also quite slow, and it uses up staggering amounts of memory. A lot of people, when they say that I was on the web and I was doing this, that, and the other thing, and it just seemed like my computer is getting slower and slower. The average Google Chrome page will use up 1 gigabyte of memory. So if you have 10 tabs open, that's 10 gigs of memory being used by nothing but Chrome. And if you only got 12 or 14 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, that means that most of the memory on your machine is being used by Chrome. Apple doesn't do that. So there are, these are tools, and I do use Gmail, but I don't use the Gmail client. I do use Chrome, but not for banking. I use, for things that I want to be private and secure, I use Apple Mail and I use Safari.
Great information. Thank you.
I have a question. You talked about the young man that had Mac traders. I need somebody to come and help me with my computer. Do you have people that people that will come here?
I don't know if the guy from Mac Traders will do that or not. And I'm trying really hard not to play favorites here. I've met the guy who owns Mac Traders, and he's competent. When we first moved into town, I saw that there was a Mac store. I went over and talked to him, watched what he did, saw the kind of advice that he gave, and I considered it quite decent. A lot of people I know who consider themselves computer experts, and they have cards made up and they tell you that they do this, that, and the other thing. These people have no particular training or expertise. They're basically hobbyists who decided that they could turn it into something that would pay. And a lot of them are really, really, really bad. So I try not to recommend somebody unless I have some kind of interaction that convinced me that they know what they're doing. And I am the guy who runs Mac Traders is quite good, and he's also good on things other than the latest hardware. if you go to a Genius Bar in Seattle, for example, and you want help with something, and you come in with a 2012 MacBook, you're probably showing them a piece of machinery that nobody in the store has ever seen. So they can't be that much help. But the Glenn at Mac Traders, he was perfectly comfortable working with your 2012 machine as well as your 2022 machine. So,
How would you find out how to get a hold of him?
if you just go into Google and you type in Mac space traders, it should be about the first thing that pops up. And his website is still up and went on the front
Oh, it
page of the
is, huh?
website. Pardon?
Oh, so his website still is
Yeah,
up?
his website's still up, and on the front page it has a
And
phone
are
number and
there
email.
other people that you would recommend?
I have run into a lot of people who tell me that they're computer experts that have convinced me that I would never ask them what time of day it was, much less computer expertise, because there are just a lot of people like this one guy, I was a bank manager for 20 years. I know computers like the back of my hand. I talked to him for 5 minutes and really, I'm not sure if he knows what the back of his hand looks like. Because there's when you're asking for help for people with your own equipment, there are two things that are important. First of all, does the guy know his stuff? And the second one is, can he explain it to me in terms that I can understand? Glenn has experience at both of those, so that's good. If I wanted to impress you, I could give you a presentation on computer security that none of you would understand, and you'd be very impressed with how smart I am. But that's not really useful. And so there aren't that many people that I can recommend simply because they don't have those two qualities. They really don't have the expertise, or if they do, they don't have it to a degree that they could explain it to mere mortals.
Well, I got my first Mac at Alderwood Mall with my nephew, who's an engineer, and I worked at St. Joe's Evening, so I never could go to South Center for any kind of classes or anything. So we in our household are not techies for sure, and we need some basic help.
Yeah,
Anna, do you have a pen or pencil handy? I
Yeah.
can give you Glenn's phone number because I have it on a Post-it right on the bottom of my monitor.
Oh, good.
I recommend him very highly. I've used him on several occasions.
I'm ready
And
with a
His
pencil.
phone number is 360-525-4315, and his name is Glenn Gilliam.
Did you say 525?
360-525-4315.
Yeah, I've been into Mac Traders with him, and he was good. Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
there's supposed to be some guy in Port Townsend who's quite good too, but nobody's ever been able to identify him, so I've never bothered to look him up. But again, it's not so much that I'm saying that people are out to deceive you. It's just that a lot of people really, how many people who drive a car think that they're bad drivers? Everybody thinks there's a great driver, and yet statistically, half of them are at least bad, just statistically. And I see a lot of people who think they're hot stuff and they're really not. So I'm reluctant to recommend somebody. But Glenn, I've talked to him and he actually knows what he's doing. Did you have something to say, Chris?
Yes, so I was hoping that there would be another small iPhone. So
Oh,
I'm
yes.
looking at the 13 mini, if I can snag one to replace this guy.
I don't know that you can get the 13 mini. When Apple brought out the 14s, they continued some of the 13s, but I don't think they continued the 13 mini. However,
it's still on the Apple Store website.
well, then that's a step in the right direction. But I will tell you, this is a what is this? This is a 13 Pro Max. Kathleen's 14 Pro Max is smaller than this one.
Yeah.
This is,
The screen size is the same, but you can actually lay her phone on top of mine. It's actually smaller than mine. So the screen is the same size, but it uses less space on the border and such. I really don't think that you would find the 14 too large.
Really?
I don't think so.
Well,
The reason why the 14s aren't popular is a lot of people thought that, women have small hands and so on and so forth.
mhm.
Percentage wise, more women have the 13 and 14 maxes than men. Percentage wise, more women have it. And there are a couple of reasons. One is they're not that hard to hold. And the second is they read on them. They can read books and so on and so forth. And you can't really do that on the smaller screens. They're too small.
I don't want to do that. I just want a phone.
Well, an iPhone is a lot more than just a phone, though.
I know that. Otherwise, I would have had one sooner.
But
I like this little guy. I mean, I've
I-
had him 11 or 12 years.
I don't
I've
think
only dropped him 3 times, and 2 of those were in the last year.
I think the 13 and the 14 non-pro versions are not that. I don't think they're too big. Because they're really not. And the other problem that people are having with the 13s and minis is they were small enough, they were dropping them. So,
but a good case in any, no matter what you get.
yeah, you should, any iPhone you get, you should also get a good case. The one I have is made by, who's it made by? OtterBox.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I've dropped it a number of times. And Kathleen, on her last phone, she went through, I think, 2 cases. She dropped one once that the case cracked, and we bought another case, and phone was fine. So
Lawrence, every time I see the folded Android phone, what is it, a Galaxy, I get envious because it just looks so handy. There you are.
it looks great in the commercials, but the reviews are not that stellar. The people,
Well, I wouldn't, but I'm just saying, I kept hoping that Apple would come out with a foldable.
well, with the foldable, when the what was it? Motorola Razr phone was a foldable phone. When those came out, I got one at work. Noah bought me one, so instead of working 9 to 5, I was working 24 hours a day as soon
Yeah.
as I got that phone. But one of the things that I liked about it is it looked like a Star Trek communicator. You just flip it open and Scotty would beam you up. However, with an iPhone, you really can get beamed up. I mean, this really is a tricorder communicator. You might think that it's more than you want, but you'll be surprised.
Mm.
Such a skeptical look. Yeah, Kathleen's fond of the fact that she can just tell the phone to do things. Like she was making something, I can't remember what she was making, but her hands were sticky and she wanted to call me. And so she just said, "Hey Siri, call Lawrence," and the phone called for Lawrence's iPhone and it called me. And she couldn't have done that with a, yes, stop it. Our HomePod wants to call me. Any other questions? Something I wanted to talk about, just mentioned, this is not a question, this is just something that is cool that I did not know about. And I'm going to share my screen again. I don't know which one is which. Let's try this one. Which screen? You are screen sharing. That's the one I'm sharing, apparently. Can you see my screen here? Nope. cannot see my screen. How about now?
Yep.
Okay. I didn't realize it, but on the iPhone, for sometimes they've had a white noise machine so that you can go into settings, accessibility, audio visual, and it'll play background sounds. And it'll play bright noise, dark noise, ocean, rain, and stream. And I thought, you're kidding me, because I know people who have noise machines to do this, but it comes on your iPhone. You don't even have to ask for it. You just have to go and turn it on. And I saw this article, I didn't pay any attention to it until I went to bed one night and Kathleen was using the background noise. So I learned that it really does exist because she was using it, but it's on the phone and it's been there all the time. I never knew. So if any of you have thought about getting one of these devices to provide background noise for sleeping, yeah, it's already on the phone. All you have to do is go look for it. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I've set up, the automatic update.
Yes.
Oftentimes it doesn't automatically update. It just doesn't automatically update, even though it's set to automatically update.
Are you talking about the phone or your desktop?
iPad,
Okay.
mostly my iPad and my iPhone, I think.
The updates will only work if it's plugged in. So it has to be plugged in and it has to have at least a 50% charge before it'll download the update. So if it's not plugged in and you just have it sitting on your table, no, it's not going to update. I will tell you that probably 80% of the time I also trigger the update. But if you don't do an update and you have it set to do automatic update, at some point it'll actually complain and say, plug me in and let me do an update, which is why I suggest everyone have the automatic update. The other thing about the automatic update, if you don't have a good Wi-Fi signal, I have it so my phone will not update over cell. And the reason for that is I don't want to go through my entire data plan just to update the phone. So I have it only update over Wi-Fi. And if you have a poor Wi-Fi signal, it may not be able to download the update. So make sure you have a good Wi-Fi signal and make sure it's plugged in and it's charged at least halfway, and then it should do the update. And if it doesn't, just push the button and force it. Apple does that to make sure that it doesn't destroy your data plan, and also to make sure that it doesn't stall halfway through the update process by running out of juice. Because at that point, you'd have to go to Apple to get it fixed, and that would upset you. Any other questions? No? Kathleen and I are going to work on it so that in November, we will either do a presentation on accessibility functions or on health in Apple devices. And it's possible that we might combine the two topics, or we might start on one and then extend it on into the other, because there are a whole bunch of things on your Mac and on your iPad and on your iPhone that are useful in terms of accessibility, even if you don't think that you need accessibility functions.
Like low-light restaurants.
Yes, she mentioned low light restaurants.
Low light restaurants, yeah.
But as an example, on my Mac, I have it so that if I wiggle the mouse back and forth, the pointer gets bigger. And how do you do that? You go into accessibility and you tell it to zoom the pointer if you wiggle the mouse. And I have a big screen, so it's really nice if I lose the mouse to find out where it is, just wiggle it back and forth. But you can also get it to read you text. You can get it to do automatic typing. I had surgery on this shoulder a couple of years ago, and I couldn't use my right hand, and I'm a touch typist, and I found this very frustrating. So I got to pay a lot of attention to the dictation features, which work very well. But if you made an error and you say, oh no, I shouldn't have said that, of course, the Mac will just type out, oh no, I shouldn't have said that. It doesn't magically go back and correct it. But there are a lot of accessibility features that you might be surprised at how easy they are to use and how good they are. So we'll either talk about health or accessibility next month, or both. Is that some
Lawrence?
reason? Pardon?
Oh, I have a question. Are you planning another seminar like you did on October 1st?
Kathleen and I were talking about that. We had a whole bunch of people afterwards. They were very pleased with the fact that we talked about security and privacy on computers, but a whole bunch of people had questions on phones. And we thought about that, and we don't own an Android phone. So we could talk about privacy and security on iPads and iPhones, but we really can't. We don't have the resources to deal with Android. I've used Android machines in the past, but I don't own one, so it's hard for me to demonstrate something like that. But that was the number one question that people had. And along with some horror stories, like this one woman was saying that she had carefully locked down her mother's computer. Her mother's in her 80s. She carefully locked down her mother's computer and did all this, but she hadn't paid attention to the phone, and scammers came in via her phone, and her mother had an Android phone, and scarfed up the address book with all of her contacts and a bunch of other stuff through her phone. Well, that's something that probably should be addressed, but I don't have the resources to do that.
Anybody
Lawrence
else?
is the only one frozen.
Yeah,
Oh, now he's moving. I saw him move.
Rose Lawrence.
Lawrence?
Yeah, I see that. I was talking. What I noticed was that the live transcript stopped, and I thought, why did it stop? And so I was wondering about that and wasn't paying attention to the fact that everything else stopped too. But we have had requests for another live seminar, but I need to. I don't want to have just a Mac specific topic. I want to have a more general topic as kind of an outreach to the community. I don't know how many of you were at the presentation on October 1st, but it was about 90% Mac people. However, after I was done, I'd say about 50% of the questions were from Windows people. So I thought it was a success. We probably could have done with a little bit more promotion about it. You had a fairly short promotion period, but we were also planning on doing it at the end of October, and the church said the only time they were free was at the start of October. So we were about 3 weeks short of our planning phase.
If you found someone who has an Android, could they partner with you in a presentation?
Yes, I'm more than happy to do that. It's a bit difficult to display Android stuff on the screen, though. Macs and iPads are actually fairly easy. Android is tougher, so we still have to think about it. But yes, if we had a partner, I'd be more than willing to. We might have to just deal with screenshots rather than a demo. But yes, I'd be perfectly happy at partnering with someone.
Great. So it's not ruled out then?
Oh, not
That
at all.
might be the presentation. Great, looking forward to it. And all live presentations. That was such a nice setting there.
Kathleen and I were talking about it. We also think that Saturday afternoons are probably about the best time. It's especially during the winter, there's the sun's still up, and that's always a plus. And if people want to schedule the time to spend their Saturday doing that, they can. Whereas during the weekday, sometimes it's much harder to. There are too many other conflicts. People have to go grocery shopping and go to the doctor's office and all kinds of, and work, all kinds of things. Anything else?
Lawrence, do you know if the new library in Squim's conference room will be large enough to hold our meetings there?
They, for those of you who haven't been to the library recently, you can't use the conference rooms at all. They're not planning on reopening for other groups until after they finish their expansion. But they're really, really, really excited. They think they'll have much more stuff that they can share. So you wouldn't necessarily have to bring in your own projection equipment or anything. They might have stuff for you to use. They're very excited about the idea of it being a more of a community center than it has in the past. So it'd still be a library, but they want it to be more of a community center than they've had the capability in the past. I really wish that the levy had gone through a couple of years ago, because the original plan was really outstanding, and what they're getting is about a third of what they had planned for. But we'll have to wait for at least a year for them to do that. And also, they're going to temporarily relocate the library while they're doing some of the remodeling to some place in town that I could not figure out from the description where it was, but they're going to have a temporary library located someplace else while they rip things apart. So I'm looking forward to that. Kathleen asked if I got a screenshot of the attendees, and the answer is no, I didn't, but I shall do that. Anything else before we huddle off to bed?
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Very much.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you.
I shall see you next month. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.